what is remote viewing? Well, obviously, I'm seeing you from Teams and you seeing me on Teams. That is not what we call remote viewing in our sense. A remote viewing is without technology. So we're going to discuss the definition of remote viewing just to make sure that everybody's clear on what it actually is. Then we're going into a brief history of remote viewing, the scientists and the military. And at the end of the presentation, you will have a basic understanding of remote viewing, and we will do that small exercise, which is going to be a lot of fun. So, the definition of remote viewing. So remote viewing is the learned ability to transcend time and space to obtain information on people, places, and things remote in space-time, and to gather and report intelligence information on the same. That was the official definition of the Department of Defense in the US. And they set that definition because they wanted to differentiate between just having ordinary psychic abilities. It's a learned ability, so it's got to be trained in some way. Another definition is the controlled acquisition and description by mental means of information blocked from ordinary perception by distance, shield, or time. And what that means is that apart from viewing the present, we can also view the past and the future to some degree. So there's a bit of a historical background there. This all came about in the 1970s when there was the Cold War. And in the Cold War, the espionage race started against Russia. And Russia was actually into what they call psychic spying. And because they found some evidence that Russia was into psychic spying, the US could not stay behind and they had to research this. Now, in Russia, they have different terminology for this, psychotronics, psychoenergetics, biocommunication. So the translation for that to what the US knew was kind of difficult. They didn't quite understand what to do with the information. And first of all, their scientists claimed that it was nonsense. So what to do with information if the Russians are investing millions of rubles into psychical research, while the US claimed that it's not possible? And this gave a bit of cognitive dissonance for the intelligence operatives there. So they had to figure out, is this true? Is this misinformation or is this real? And they had physicists by the name of Helpotov and Russell Targ. And Helpotov started off at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, Menlo Park, California. And Russell came on later. But Hal had to find ways to prove or disprove that this could be real. And so Helpotov started to invite Ingo Swann. And Ingo Swann, very, very, very interesting person, a New York artist. He actually had a degree in biology and art, and he worked for the United Nations for a while. So he had clearances, and he was a volunteer at the ASPR in New York, where he lived. And the ASPR at the time was doing research with Dr. Carlos Osis and Dr. Gertrude Smeidler, and he was one of their research subjects, and he scored very high on psychic tests. And he came across a letter when he was doing research with Cleve Baxter, a polygraph expert. And Cleve was at the time doing polygraph tests with plants to see how plants would react to threats from people. And the plants actually peaked when they were distressed, which was very interesting. And they actually then saw the letter from Helpotov asking for research participants and explaining the research projects. And Ingo wrote to Hal, and he was invited to SRI in Menlo Park, where he had great success. First of all, he was asked to describe a device that was embedded in the concrete floor in Stanford. It was completely shielded, and it was called a magnetometer. And Ingo asked, well, where is the device? And he said, well, you're standing right on top of it because it's in the floor. Nobody can access it. Nobody has seen it, but it's operating and it's working. And there's people monitoring it right now, and nothing should be able to influence this machine. And Ingo said, okay, I will try to describe the machine. And he went in his mind underground to this machine, and he started describing the machine, and immediately the scientists panicked because in the monitoring room, it started to go haywire. The machine, that was not supposed to be able to be influenced by anything, seemed to suddenly be triggered. Now, a magnetometer measures quarks. Quarks are tiny, tiny quantum particles. So by simply remote viewing, there was actually an effect measured. Now, it could, of course, be a flaw in the system. Could have been that at that time, coincidences do happen, that there was something weird going on. So they decided to take a break, have lunch, get the scientists to calibrate the machine, come back after lunch, and do it again. And they did it again, and again, the machine was influenced by Ingo Swann describing what was embedded in the concrete, shielded by lead, completely electrically shielded. So there was no way that electrical signals could have come in. And this puzzled the scientists, and they knew that there was something going on there, and he accurately described the device. So from that point on, they did tests with several different people. Hella Hammett, for instance, was a control subject. Hella did have no psychic experiences whatsoever. Hella was a photographer and a friend of Russell Targ. And she came in as a control subject to see if she could also do it. And she was actually scoring very, very high. She had really great successes. And then a former Burbank police officer, actually police commissioner, by the name of Pat Price came on board. And Pat Price claimed that he used his psychic ability to catch criminals, and that he could describe and send his team to where they were hiding because he had this vision in his mind where they would be and what they were doing. And 9 times out of 10, he was spot on. And during the tests with Pat Price, he had many different successes. And they also tested the famous Uri Geller. Of course, he was known for spoon bending, but he's also very, very well known for being able to predict things, being able to detect things. So they did several tests on him. This got them more and more funding from the government because the government was very interested in how far could they be taking this? How far could they be doing this? And if they could do it, the Russians could do it too. And that meant that, psychic spying was real. So eventually they did some exercises and they trained some military personnel. So they came up with a process to teach people how to do it, how to measure their outcomes, and how to record it in a consistent way so that people could learn from it, and also how they could use it for intelligence purposes. And one of those things you see on the screen, at least I hope it's still up there, that is a crane that was detected in Semipalatinsk, and the coordinates were given by the CIA to one of the remote viewers, Pat Price. And Pat said, well, at these coordinates, I am perceiving this huge crane. And actually, when I'm standing near the crane, the wheel is just about my size. So it's huge. It's enormous, this crane. And at the time, they thought that it was crazy. Later on, it actually turned out to be the crane that was there. He also discovered several other things that were definitely not visible, things that were constructed inside a building, things he could not have known. So these are the things that they came up with here. I don't know if you see a pointer on the screen. Can you see my pointer? Yeah. So here, this is the size of a human being, and this is the size of the crane. It's huge. So these files are now declassified, and you can find them on the CIA libraries. So in the CIA libraries, you find declassified projects under the name Project Stargate. Now, this went on for about 25 years. And people say that remote viewing isn't useful, but why would you continue using it for 25 years if it wasn't useful, if it wasn't giving results? You would stop after 2 years if it's of no use. You wouldn't keep funding it. So it's a very interesting project, and it's now known under the last name Project Stargate, but before that it had different names. It was known as Grill Flame, Center Lane, Gondola Wish. So it had several different names, and these different names were related to different departments. So it went from the DIA to the CIA to the DOD, and every different department gave it a different name. So that's how many times people changed departments of this project. All right. Now, there's some key principles behind remote viewing. First of all, it's based on human perception and communication. Now, there's two things that humans are not very good at, and that is perception and communication. We're flawed. Well, one person might perceive something to be green, and the other says, no, it's gray. And that's differences in communication, differences in how we perceive things, sometimes even a difference of perspective. But the other thing that is really important in remote viewing is that it always uses scientific protocols, whether it's blind or double blind. And blind means that nobody in the room, so nobody knows what the target is. And double blind means that nobody in the room even knows what the target is. So these things are very, very important because it gives validity to the fact that the person is actually remote viewing. Anyone can go to a psychic fair, and at the psychic fair, there might be genuine remote viewers, and there might be people pretending that they are psychic. Unfortunately, those who are pretending they are psychic are very, very good at cold reading. They can read body language. They can look at the type of jewelry you're wearing. They can look at your responses from micro expressions in your face, whether they are on the right track or not. So having someone right in front of you who knows what you want to ask can sometimes be very difficult. It can be difficult for people to assess what's real and what is, cleverly faked. And the remote viewing protocols will actually make sure that it cannot be faked. It has to be genuine, especially the double blind, because if nobody in the room knows exactly what it is that the person is looking for, and then later on it's verified that they described the right thing, that is proof beyond reasonable doubt that there is the evidence of psychic functioning, and that's exactly what they wanted. Now, most people, especially in the 1970s, said, well, it can't be real because no other theory would support this. No known theory would support this. In the meantime, there's a lot of research being done in the quantum fields, and there's also the theory of non-local awareness. So now we're finding more and more support for that theory of non-local awareness. And that's based on quantum theory. That said, remote viewing, it still leaves a lot of questions. It's not infallible. We are humans, we can make mistakes, and it is based on perception and communication. Now, here you have some supporting evidence that indeed the remote viewing has been used by the US intelligence agencies for 25 years. And they say it's been shut down and declassified, but although it's not public, there are some questions whether you would shut down things that are really helpful. So there are some suggestions that it might be still ongoing. But several scientists and even some skeptics admit that the results cannot be by chance alone. So there is some serious evidence that although it's not infallible, the results we see with remote viewing cannot just be chance. And businesses and agencies still use remote viewing as a tool. It's used in business as well, with some astonishing results. Then there is the ongoing scientific debate. Although most scientists in the field have acknowledged that the results are beyond chance, beyond what's expected by chance, there is still the ongoing debate as to what are the underlying processes and what can we do to prove the theories that we have. So there are some very serious questions that still need to be resolved. And there are still researchers today who are collecting data and who are trying to figure out what influences a good remote viewing session, what influences what attributes does a good remote viewer need to have. One of those things is being able to have an open mind. I know some of you might have heard of the sheep-goat effect. Anyone heard of the sheep-goat effect? No? Okay. Dr. Gertrude Smeidler had done some research in the 1940s, and she did a questionnaire whereby she asked people, do you believe in psychic abilities or do you not believe in psychic abilities? And she labeled those who did not believe in psychic abilities as the goats and the people who believed as the sheep. And she found that after that, she did a test on all of them, a psychic test, and she found that the people who claimed that they didn't believe in psychic abilities, they scored below chance. And the people who said, yes, I do believe in psychic abilities, they scored above chance. Now, that's very interesting because that means that your mindset, whether you believe you can do something or you believe that you cannot do something, will influence the results. So part of a person's belief system will influence the results. But it's logical. If you believe you cannot play the piano, you probably will never touch a piano. You won't even try. So it's logical. But it is an important part of the research. So the ongoing debate of the underlying processes, what works well and what doesn't, is still ongoing. We still don't have all the answers. It'll be a long time before we do. So there are different techniques in remote viewing, and it first started off with what they call coordinate remote viewing. And the reason why it started with coordinate remote viewing is because they actually had coordinates on the map, and they asked remote viewers to describe what would be at these coordinates on the map. Now, the results were astonishing. They were really good. But scientists are clever. They figured that, since they are so good, maybe it is because these remote viewers have eidetic memories and they can remember all the coordinates on the map, latitude, longitude, and they know roughly what is there. And so that could be an explanation why they are perfectly describing what is at a coordinate on the planet. And then they decided, okay, coordinates are an agreement between humans as to a location on the map. How about we just assign random numbers to a particular coordinate on the map? We just make it random. That way, they don't know which coordinates they are, and they have to actually find out for themselves what it is. And so they did that, and the results were just as amazing. So technically, it doesn't matter if you say, I want you to describe what is going on in Paris right now, or I want you to have the coordinates of Paris and do a remote viewing session then and there. Or you can say 369538 is Paris. Describe what is there. All of these are linked with an intention of remote viewing Paris in that case. So there is a link there. And it is some sort of an agreement that we have about what to view. So these random numbers also had another major benefit. They wouldn't just have locations because certain people wouldn't stay in one location, they travel. So if you want to know where a particular person is, you can give the person a coordinate. So in practical sense, this was much easier. And in scientific sense, it was more blind because there was no way people could know what these coordinates meant because they were just random numbers. So they started to call it controlled remote viewing, mainly because Ingo had coined coordinate remote viewing, that name, and they didn't want to use Ingo's terminology, so they were a bit, we have to name it something else. And what we do is a controlled version of remote viewing, so let's call it controlled remote viewing. And that's how that started. There is also something called extended remote viewing. And extended remote viewing was developed in conjunction with the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute in Virginia, Nellisford, Virginia, actually hosted several sessions for military remote viewers to get trained in the Monroe practices, to have an out-of-body experience and see if they could enhance remote viewing with an out-of-body experience. And so they had extended remote viewing, which is a hybrid of the Monroe practice and remote viewing practice. So that's extended remote viewing. And then there is associative remote viewing. And associative remote viewing is giving people a yes or no answer. It's basically a closed question. Yes or no, red or black, up or down. Um, so it's used a lot in financial markets. Do the stock markets next week go up or down? Um, do uh, is in the casino it falling on red or black? So those type of things are used in associative remote viewing. And associative remote viewing is different because there are two different images associated with the outcome. So the image of an apple, for instance, could be a yes, and of a solid square building could be a no. And if the remote viewer sketches something that is close to an apple, the answer is likely going to be a yes. And if the remote viewer sketches something close to a structure that is square, it's more likely to be a no. And I'm saying more likely because there's always a chance that there are some things that go wrong. They do have great successes with it, but it's up and down. Sorry, my voice is going. So the great successes is, for instance, it hit the news in the 1970s, 1980s that Russell Targ and Hal Potoff tried this on the silver market, and they actually made the Wall Street Journal because they, beyond uh, chance, they could predict the silver market, and they made quite a bit of money, which was then donated to a school. So you can do a lot of good with remote viewing. Right. So now the applications of remote viewing, how is it used today? Because we're no longer in the Cold War, although there are some tensions in the world that do need to be resolved. But how is it currently being applied? So, in law enforcement, sometimes law enforcement agencies will ask remote viewers to help as an unusual or assigned witness in investigations. And that doesn't mean that you're a witness that can present in courts, but you are someone who can point them into the right direction of finding the evidence that can be used in court. So, remote viewing itself cannot be used in a court of law, but pointing someone in the right direction where to find the evidence can be used in a court of law. So the person just found the evidence. Um, business and research and development. So businesses who want to do some research and development now also use it to come up with creative ideas. Mostly engineers who are stuck with certain problems apply remote viewing for creative solutions. Engineering solutions for the future as well as for current solutions. Archaeology, where to find lost artifacts. Financial market predictions, as we said with ARV. There is a group called Crypto Viewing. It's run by Des Smith. Des specializes in predicting the crypto markets. And there's the Hussig group in Seattle. The Hussig group does an extraordinary investigations. They're a private investigator who uses remote viewing to obtain information they need in investigations. They also work with police. And there is in France Iris Institution, and they've helped even the French courts and French businesses. So they've helped a lot by applying remote viewing to some cases. Um, so the market predictions, finding lost objects, exploring unexplained aerial phenomena, very popular at this stage. They still are puzzled by what's happening in our skies. So exploring this might give them some insight into different technological capabilities. And of course, creative writing. If you're looking for a tool for creativity, this is really good because, again, you can look at the past, you can look at the present and the future. Now, remote viewing is not a standalone tool. Just doing a remote viewing session alone will not give you anything but a piece of paper with some scribbles on it. And it won't help you if it just ends up in a drawer. So you have to actually be able to do something with the information, and that's the most challenging part. So it should always be used in conjunction with other fields of expertise. So if you have a team of experts surrounding you who know what to do with that information, it can be a very powerful tool. And here's an example of one of my students. One of my students, I always task my students with real world problems that are not offensive or scary like law enforcement cases, but fun projects. And this was a project that we did for the NASA Lunar Loo competition. And all of the students did a remote viewing session on the Lunar Loo for the Artemis that was going into space and to the moon. Now, they needed a solution for a low gravity or no gravity toilet that would fit into the Artemis, that would be quiet because people trying to sleep, other people trying to go to the toilet. It needed to be hygienic. It needed to be compact. It needed to be practical. Even it shouldn't be using much power because if the power needs to be reserved, and it should be eco-friendly and waste-friendly. So the waste needed to be compacted and hygienically stored. And this is the design one of my students created and actually submitted to the competition. And we had great fun talking to astronauts about how they use the toilet in space. And this design nearly won. The winning design was created by an Indian team that was very, very similar to what is displayed here. I won't tell you the ins and outs. That's obviously now proprietary information of the student, and he might make it into a patent. I think he's already working on that and get that to other space agencies who might need it as well. So this is what you could do with remote viewing creatively. Another thing, one of my expertise is investigations. So I was asked to remote view for stand in for a former law enforcement officer who was working with the FBI. And he actually got a request, but he was unwell at the time. So he passed it on to me and said, could you do a session? It's urgent. So I didn't know at the time that on Wednesday, the 18th of July, 2018, Molly Tibbetts, a 20-year-old student from Brooklyn, Iowa, USA, was jogging at 7:30 p.m. And for months, the police, even the FBI, tried to locate Molly Tibbetts without results. And the problem was that, they couldn't figure out where she was. So I did a remote viewing session here in Perth on Sunday, the 19th of August, and I sent around 1800 hours in Perth, Western Australia time. I got a message, can you do me a favor? Are you available to do a session? It's for the FBI and it's urgent. I can't do it at the moment, so can you take this one? My answer was, okay, I just finished work. I'll drive home and do a session. And they send me the target reference number, 11114141. That's all I got. All I knew, it's for the FBI, and it's 11114141. That's it. And so I sat down and I started sketching and describing, first of all, a long straight road and a field. Now, from my investigation point of view, I know that police can't do anything with that information. There are so many long straight roads and fields out there that it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. So whatever it is that we're looking for, and I didn't know they were looking for Molly Tibbetts, was in a field somewhere with a long straight road. That was not going to help them. So I needed more information. And one thing was I went back in time what happened before whatever it was ended up in this field. And I sketched the person, and this is the face of the person. When I sent it off, within 24 hours, almost, well, 48 hours, a guy was arrested that is, as you can see on the screen, spitting image of the sketch I made. It turned out this guy killed Molly Tibbetts, hid her body in a cornfield, and they would never have been able to find her if he didn't lead them to the field. So I gave him a solid lead there. So this is possible. This is possible with remote viewing. Does it happen always? No. We are off sometimes. Sometimes it's not as accurate, but it can be. Here's another case. In November 2007, in Zand in the province of Groningen, the Netherlands. And at the time I was living in the Netherlands. I'm originally from there, if you hear the funny accent. For months, the police tried to find an arsonist setting fires to local barns and sheds. And a few weeks before the arrest was made, I provided local police with a sketch of a person of interest. Even though I had never been in the area and I lived 200 km from the place where the fires happened, I managed to sketch and describe the person and other significant details about him. At the time, investigators, and they weren't allowed to tell me because I'm a member of the public, at the time they had this guy under surveillance. And so when the detective saw my sketch, my identikit sketch, his eyes lit up. And I was describing his age, that he worked in delivery of some sort. He was a newspaper delivery boy. So this can really help investigations. Now, there are some ethical considerations of remote viewing. So remote viewers don't know the full story unless the remote viewing session leads to the facts and the facts confirm the remote viewing session. Before that, it's all just perception. So having information is one thing, but what to do with the information is another thing. So sometimes you can have information that could jeopardize people's lives, and you don't want to create chaos. So let's say there is a person who went missing, but they went missing because they're under a witness protection program and their family is not supposed to know where they are, because if they do, their life might be at risk. So if you inadvertently give out information about a person that is missing and the family say they went missing, we don't know where they are, and you help the family, you might inadvertently get people killed, which is not what we want. So what to do and how to deal with information you get responsibly is quite a challenge. Remote viewers are not always experts in the field that they are remote viewing. I've done remote viewing on people's medical issues. I am not a doctor. But a doctor can make sense of what I sketched and then assess the situation and look for different clues or a different diagnosis, second opinion. So I am never claiming to be an expert in a field that I'm not an expert in, because I'm not. So sessions always need a second opinion from an expert in the field. Remote viewers are always blind to the targets. So giving an unsuspecting or novice remote viewer shocking targets may cause them trauma. I know when I work for law enforcement that the things that I can see sometimes are not great. They can give you some nightmares. If you don't know how to deal with that, you could have a problem. So if you're a novice remote viewer and you start out remote viewing something from a blind target pool, you never know what's in there. And it could be quite shocking. And that's how, unfortunately, people get turned off from remote viewing because good intending people try to teach them remote viewing and they accidentally give them targets that are not that great and actually pretty gruesome. So that's a warning. Implications of remote viewing. So, what does it all mean for us as humans? Well, humans possess non-local awareness, and they can obtain information from past, present, and future. And this information could be accessed by anyone, but it's usually more accurate when the individual has developed a talent or has practiced the skill for a few months or few years. The other point is there is no such thing as true privacy. And I don't want to make it sound paranoid. Don't get paranoid on me, because people cannot look everywhere. When I focus on one thing, I'm not focused on, other people. So I only focus on things that would be of interest or the things that I've been given as a target. Um, Events in the past have been recorded somewhere in what remote viewers call the matrix. Other people might call it the Akashic records. Um, Other people might call it quantum information or quantum field. Um, so it is recorded in some way, even if there are no recording devices. The future is already here to some degree. The future can be influenced by the choices that we make, and the choices that we make can be influenced by remote viewing sessions. So this is all one big connected network that we're living in, past, present, and future. So everything is connected to some level, on some level. And we all have a stroke of genius in us. That means that if you wanted to remote view a solution to a very difficult problem, you could. Not that you would make sense of it, but someone else who has that knowledge might be able to make sense of it and think you're a genius. If you can be one thing, be kind. And if you can do one thing, do the right thing. The universe is watching. So that's what remote viewing teaches us. What are the benefits of remote viewing? It's a systematic way of learning and improving your own capabilities in the area of ESP. This systematic approach allows you to learn from your experience quickly and adjust your approach accordingly. The practice gives you insight into your own mind's function, and it reveals your psychology, your creativity, your ability to find solutions to problems, and your insight into the bigger picture. With enough practice, you can enhance naturally psychic intuitive abilities. So you can just use it as a psychic, but then it's not remote viewing. You discover other places you never knew existed. You can travel to other planets and see what it's like there. You will put things in perspective. You will realize how small you really are. It's more like a microbe in the universe. And you will put things in that bigger perspective. So you will have the benefits of some foresights. And it definitely comes in handy in the casino sometimes. Don't do it too often because you might get in trouble with the casino. They don't like that very much. So you will have access to hidden knowledge within you. And creativity is just intelligence having fun. And that was a quote by Albert Einstein. I totally agree. So the future of remote viewing, a global digital blackout, may force us to use alternative ways of communication and information collection. If a big solar storm hits, or something man-made that knocks out all the electricity, we cannot use this way of communication. We'll have to use other ways of communication. Who nowadays can do that still? Not many people. Remote viewing is helpful where technology fails. It also is a cost-effective way of finding creative solutions to problems. And we need to understand and use our capabilities, develop them, and use them to our fullest potential. And awareness makes people kinder. Right. Try remote viewing for yourself. Are you ready? All good? Excellent. All right. So now that you have your blank piece of paper and preferably black ink, but if you have blue in this case, it doesn't really matter that much, but preferably when you do remote viewing, it's with black ink. It's important during this program, you are focused on perceptions. So you are not guessing, you need to reach inside and look at descriptions that you can come up with. So I don't want you to try and name whatever this is. I want you to describe it. Describe your feelings. So we're not ready yet. We're not ready yet. So during this process, you are asked for your perceptions. Do not interpret your perceptions. Do not say, oh, this is this, or this must be that. Try and keep it as neutral as possible for yourself. You are only allowed to ask yourself, what am I perceiving? And use descriptions only. So you do not need to close your eyes during the session. Before the session starts, we'll ask you to close your eyes for a moment and then open your eyes, because sketching and describing with your eyes closed is hard, right? So you do not need to close your eyes while you're doing the session. Writing and sketching with your eyes closed, not a good idea. Right. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is 07628082. Clear your mind for a moment and create a blank screen in your mind. Create a blank screen in your mind. Just clear your mind for a moment. Yeah. Excellent. All right. Write your name at the top of the right-hand corner of the paper. And underneath that, write today's date, the time, and your current location, which is Melbourne, I think. And then we are skipping a few formal steps. So this is not a formal remote viewing session for those who are familiar with remote viewing, but we have limited time. Write the target reference number 07628082 on the left-hand side of the paper. And at the same time, write that on the blank screen in your mind also. Yep. Now ask yourself, in relation to this target, what colors are you perceiving? Write down the colors you are perceiving. Then in relation to this target, what textures are you perceiving? If you were to touch this, what would it feel like? And you might even want to sketch them if you can't find the word for the texture, you might want to sketch a little bit of the texture. Next, what shapes are you perceiving in relation to this target? Write them down or sketch them. What shapes, forms? Now, in relation to this target, what smells are you perceiving? If you were there, what would it smell like? And then in relation to this target, what sounds are you perceiving? Write them down. And in relation to this target, what temperatures are you perceiving? Write them down. Last but not least, if you were hovering in the air, looking down on this target, what are you perceiving? Sketch that. So you're hovering in the air, you're looking down on this target. What are you perceiving? Right, now write down end session. And put a thick line under it, and I mean end session. Right, and put the time down. That took you a couple of minutes, right? Now, you haven't got very much information. A true remote viewing session would be a lot longer, and we would go far more in depth. So I'd be surprised if you get the gist of what the target would be. Now, I have to admit to you that I don't even know what the target is. And that is double blind, right? So what I have done, and I've developed this, is I've created an online system that randomly selects the targets out of a target database, and it will generate a random number and assigns that generated random number to the target. So I'm going to log in. There we go. You should be able to see this now.
Yes.
Yep. All right. Now you're not in Australia. I'm going to change this. You are, most of you, not all of you, are in Melbourne. And what time in Melbourne did you start the session?
3 p.m.
3 p.m.
Oh, sorry, 2:59. 2:59.
2:59 to 2:59. Right. And what time did you end the session?
3:03 p.m.
3:03 p.m. So we'll do 3:03 p.m. Good. Now, if you were to, can I see hands? Who thinks this has got to do with land? Couple? Who had water? Who had something like a mountain? Only two. A structure? Couple more. A life form? Two. Energy? Three. So I think the majority was land, right? Okay. Now, can you give me some descriptors that, so Russell, can you get some descriptors from people?
Okay, well, some descriptions if anyone would like to volunteer. Yes, at the back there, Governor.
So what are you asking?
Descriptors, yes. Can you just explain that a little, please, Sandra? You're looking for the words
So
that you wrote down?
the words you wrote down.
Okay.
So first was the text was the spiky, round, and water.
Spiky, round, and water.
Spiky, round,
Snow.
and water.
And then what I saw was the tops of mountains, but I was like in an aeroplane looking down on snow caps.
Tops of snow-capped mountains.
Tops
And
of snow. So I'll just say tops, mountain, snow. Yep.
All right.
What else?
water.
Well, I think we said we got water, haven't we? We got
Yeah,
water.
we got water.
So how
Anyone
many,
else?
how many words? How many submissions do we need?
Just a couple.
Okay. And who else would like to volunteer?
I mistook number. I write at the
Okay.
digit 9, so probably it is valid or not
Okay.
valid.
Would you like to say what words?
Yeah,
you wrote down?
what I had, but it was a mix up.
Oh, you got the wrong number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much, huh? Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'm not eligible.
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think, Sandra? One of the participants wrote down the wrong number accidentally, so.
It might or might not work. So we'll have to see. We'll have to follow the procedure. So someone who has the right number.
Anyone else?
Iridescent blue, shiny, slick, smooth.
Okay.
Surface.
Iridescent.
Oh, you can hear that? Okay.
Yeah.
Iridescent blue.
Blue. Shiny.
Shiny.
Slick, smooth.
Slick and smooth.
Slick and smooth. All right. I think I misspelled that one. Okay.
Listen.
Right, that's enough.
That's
Now, I can't upload any of your sketches, but normally we can upload the files. So I'm going to submit the session here. Ooh, smoky. So it was not snowy, it was smoky.
Wow.
Wow.
Rectangle.
Yeah.
Has the blue, the shoulders, red, yellow, blood is flash, flash, red, super eclectic on the.
Okay. You sketched it from above, right? So let's have a look at Google Maps, because I also included Google Maps in this session. So who had water?
Right, smooth rectangle this way, and then
Who had water? The water is right here. That's the Hudson River. And this is the location. So from above, this is the location. The water is right here.
What do you think, Sandra, if we do a call out to see who thinks they got a description which was closest to the target image?
Yeah.
All right. Does anyone feel they got a really strong result there? Yeah. Would you like to tell us what you wrote down?
I just drew. I saw like ruin. I actually wrote ruins next to it. And
Ruins.
I agree with like buildings that have been broken down.
Right. So buildings which have been ruined, right? Or ruins of buildings.
Yeah.
What was it? What else was in the descriptions?
I had. Well, I actually had flowers, cigarettes, smoke.
Smoke.
Sunny day.
Oh,
Sunny day.
yeah.
Bricks.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think we have a talented individual here.
Yeah.
I have quite a lot, you know.
Anyone else?
Yeah, me.
Okay, up in front here. Do you want to speak up?
Yes, thank you. So I had shiny metal steel smooth, blue green white, rectangle, iron smoke, hiss boiling,
Oh, yeah.
extremely hot, like ovens in a row, bricks and smoke.
Wow.
Wow.
Good.
Yes. Perfect.
Excellent.
Wow.
Any further ones? Yeah. I'll have a place.
So I had orange, blue, black.
Orange.
Soft ripples.
Sorry, can you hear Sandra?
Yeah, I can hear.
Blue, black, soft ripples, circles, ocean smell, waves, and hot.
Okay. We've got a
Wow.
lot of heat there.
Very good. Very good, guys.
Okay, we
And
have-
you know what? I can actually guarantee you that you have not been reading my mind, because I didn't even know what the target would be that would come up for you, because the computer has randomly assigned it. So therefore, you're not reading my mind. You're actually going to the target location. And the actual task was sketch and describe the photograph at the time, the situation at the time the photograph was taken. So this is pretty good. Now we've only entered a few session summary words in here. This is my old system. I'm going to renew this system where AI will actually assess what has been put into the system, and it will compare your sketches and descriptions with the actual photograph and see how much of it is correct. So that's my version 2. This is still the old version, so I'm working on that at the moment. I'm going to switch back. Did we like this?
Yeah, definitely. So
Give yourself a round of applause.
Yeah, give you applause. Thank you, Sandra. Would you like to take some questions from the audience?
Yep. All right. Questions?
Any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
The program we were just on, is that public? You can access that publicly?
Oh, so the lady wants to know if the program that you're on that website for the photos, is that accessible by the public?
Currently not. It will be in the future. It will be accessible to students. But in the future, the public will have access by subscription, and students will join for free.
Okay. All right, fantastic.
Yeah.
Any questions for Sandra?
Could you tell us what was your most successful viewing in your career?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I think the most fulfilling ones are the ones where you actually help people. So I think that one of the best ones, I think, is the Molly Tibbetts case, where we had a really good result. Yeah.
Okay. Did that end in a conviction of the
Yes.
perpetrator? And you
Yeah,
actually...
and the recovery of the body, because
Right.
that gives the family closure.
Yeah, right. Okay, and they wouldn't have been able to do that without your remote viewing help?
They might have been able to. We can't say that for sure, but it definitely helped prove the case,
Yeah,
so
right.
to speak.
Very good. Okay. Yes, up the back.
Just considering we're in the Theosophical Society, and you mentioned the Akashic Records, which is quite a significant teaching in Theosophy, where the founders would, and a lot of the books in the library here is about antediluvian investigations and archaeology.
So did you say anti-delusion?
Antediluvian, pre-flood.
Okay, all right.
Atlantis, Lemuria, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Have you experienced or have you had a look at the so-called Akashic records for prehistory or that level of?
Okay, I think I got it. Yeah. All right. So Sandra, have you do you look at or do you access the Akashic records which go back to ancient history on Earth? Is that fair summary?
In a way, people call it different things. Remote viewers call it the Matrix. But I think that in Jungian terminology, it could be the collective unconscious. So everybody calls it something different. So I'm not sure if it is exactly the same, but we do seem to all have access to information, past, present, or future. I have gone back in time quite a bit, not necessarily ancient times, because I always want to be able to prove things. So I want to have evidence. I am not satisfied. Some people might say I'm satisfied if I've remote viewed the dinosaurs roaming the earth. But I'm sort of like, I want to see the evidence that that type of dinosaur was indeed at that time on Earth. I'm more a person who wants evidence above all.
Okay. Anything else? Yes.
Just one question on that is, but what would you classify as evidence? Would it be the scientific or would it be something else? Because if you're looking in the past, how could you prove it in the present if it's not really scientifically or historically written or something like that?
Well, there is a case where you can go back into the past and look at what happened in the past to then uncover where that location might be. You can do an archaeological search based on that and recover the evidence. So it can be applied in that way, but it's difficult. It's not an easy task, and you need a whole team. For instance, we have worked on a project called The Grooming Duck, and you can actually download the full remote viewing report from my website, where in the 1940s, 1950s, a rescue plane in Greenland was missing. It went missing in a storm, and there was the pilot and the navigator on board, plus a person they rescued, and they've never been seen again. So someone who had interest in the case asked me to do a remote viewing session on that, and I assembled a team and we did a remote viewing session, which was astonishing, because you got to remember the team doesn't know what they're remote viewing. They had airplane, they had the logo on the airplane, United States logo of that particular type of aircraft, which was a very unusual type aircraft, that it was hanging in a precarious situation in a crevasse, which they didn't know they were remote viewing Greenland, but nothing but crevasses and glaciers there in that area. So it was an amazing session that did sort of indicate certain locations where they could look, but it's still hard because to get there, it's such a rugged terrain, and you can only get there at certain times of the year, because otherwise you'll become a victim yourself of the cold weather and the unhospitable terrain there. So it's really, really difficult without a good team, and this is a really expert team working on it, to get that information. Yeah.
Yep, we've got another question here.
So I'm curious about some of the applications. For example, going into the future and looking at climate change or healing work in Akashic records.
So what are some of the other applications for remote viewing that could be impactful for the world or people, like figuring out something to do about climate change or something in relation to healing? What are some applications?
So
yeah.
We've worked on things like in developing countries, there are, for instance, artisan miners who have used mercury to extract gold from the gold ore, and our solution was to, or our task was to find a different solution for the gold miners there to not use mercury, because it's toxic to the environment, it's toxic to the people, it's not very good in use, and there must be a better way. And we did describe a better way of doing it, which goes back to a very old and ancient technique that they could use. So yeah, we do find solutions to common problems that could pollute the environment or cause climate change, business solutions.
You mentioned earlier about businesses that are based in America that use remote viewing for various purposes. Are there any such businesses like that here in Australia?
In Australia, it's not very well known. So in Australia, it's still very, we're a bit behind in that way. But in Europe, there's businesses using it. In France, in Germany, in the Netherlands, Shell Corporation has used it. Sony Corporation has used remote viewing. Big corporations have actually used remote viewing on certain projects. In the US, people are far more open to it because they trust their military. They know that they wouldn't invest a lot of money if it wasn't very useful. So they know what it can do. And well, maybe one day Australia will catch up.
All right, we've got time for one more question, please. Yes, here in front.
You haven't mentioned much about medical intuition. Do you think it's a part of remote viewing, or is there any relation in your mind?
So I have done sessions on people's medical issue, but at the time I'm just getting a target reference number, and there is a medical issue, which could be anything. I then describe what I'm perceiving in the body, and I give them a full report. They then go to a medical expert with that report, and they investigate further. So I'm still currently waiting for the response, because that investigation takes MRIs and whatever else. So they need to confirm that could be the case, but without me knowing anything about the person's background, I described things that happened to him years ago that caused him an injury that is now playing up, and that's probably likely the cause of the medical issue. So yes, it can be done. It depends on what you want to use it for. Remote viewing is like a multi-tool. You can apply it in many different ways to many different topics, as long as you have experts who are willing to look at your data and then make their expert opinion count.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Sandra. If we can give Sandra an applause, guys. we're going to go to a break.